Hello, this is video number 4. I will be doing a presentation next week on Dr. Alfred Crosby, who is a professor emeritus at the University of Texas, Austin. He is most famous for his work on a book called The Columbian Exchange, and he is known for coining the phrase Columbian exchange, and that is in reference to the impact of living organisms traded between the New World and the Old World. And that's in my transatlantic history class, which is the doctoral program that I am, working toward. And this particular Columbian exchange concept really got me thinking about my ultimate goal to either develop scholarship in or gain more research into some things dealing with Columbus, being my major area of study is mass incarceration, and mass incarceration in North America can be traced primarily to Christopher Columbus, which is why it's really telling when people don't understand minority peoples, quote unquote, minority peoples' hostility towards the celebration of Christopher Columbus. With the Columbian Exchange, Dr. Crosby is making an assertion that to rather give credence to the claims of innate European superiority, that he explains the relative ease of which Europeans conquered Neo-Europe's South America, North America, Central Africa, west coast of Africa, as being a product of biological and ecological processes. One of the major contributors of the European domination was disease, which is a natural byproduct of human interaction with animals. One reason why the Spaniards were able to really conquer South America was because of the fact, and why they were able to farm, was because they actually had a lead on the indigenous people and how they used animals. But because Europeans had such a close relationship with domesticating animals, they picked up diseases from them that they had grown immune to. But a group of people who weren't in close proximity with the animals didn't have these type of diseases that Europeans had. And so consequently, when Europeans shifted from being hunter-gatherers to being farmers who settled in large stationary communities and domesticated small animals, they exposed themselves to conditions that endangered diseases that would later assist them in conquering these Neo-Europes, which is saying they were spending all this time with these animals, ox, donkeys, horses, dogs, being around mice, rats, roaches, houseflies, worms, that it's saying that it was part of what killed these indigenous groups, and it was. But I think that this is almost an apologetic type of history where generally American whites find excuses for the treachery of Europeans. And not to make it a black-white conversation, we're just talking about fact and non-fact. It wasn't that the Europeans came here and the natives started dropping dead, so they just moved in over their bones. They purposely took their lands. There were treaties that showed the activity, and there's record to show that they were murderous, and they recognized that their diseases were useful, so it was more of a biochemical war as opposed to an accident. But I did gain a clearer understanding of, because in the introduction of the transatlantic class and working with learning Alfred Crosby's Columbian exchange information, it helped me understand that you have global history and then you have transatlantic history. Now, transatlantic history is any exchange, goods, services, resources, customs, migration, government, laws, anything that went from community of the coastal shore lands, Africa, Europe, anything, North America, South America, the Caribbean, all of those lands that in their interaction through history that ties to whatever came or went is ultimately Atlantic history. Cotton coming from the South to the European lands, that has a transatlantic route. If it went between 1419, when the Portuguese invaded the western shores of Africa, or 1492, when Christopher Columbus came to the New World, South America, Caribbean, that begins what's called Atlantic history up until about 1880, 1900, generally 1800. Somewhere in there, it's very unclear. It's a lot of scholarship on where that ends, but it's generally 1800 to 1880, right after slavery, after chattel slavery. The 13th Amendment did not stop slavery. We know that. Read it. But that ties to my interest in Christopher Columbus and the transatlantic part of history. That's why when we hear Atlantic history, transatlantic history, a lot of times, we'll cut off if we don't hear the word slavery or we don't hear the word slave trade or something like that. But the mass incarceration being my main area of study, transatlantic history is apropos because the slave trade was an Atlantic exchange back and forth, okay? Because not only did the slaves come, there were forced migration, but the work that they did caused products that came back across the Atlantic. Now, 1492, where was Christopher Columbus? Per his journals, he was on the west coast of Africa. We know that. January 1492. We know in October of 1492, he was in the New World. What a lot of people don't know is that Spain, Portugal, and France all turned him down to fund his conquest, to go around the world to get to India. If people are still teaching that they didn't know the world was round, they did. And the funny part was nobody wanted to fund him because they knew enough about maritime travel that what he was proposing took longer than what he was saying, and nobody would give him any money. But suddenly, in 1492, not only did he learn excellently what it was that he was supposed to learn, but he went straight to the New World. What happened differently? How did he get this knowledge, and what convinced them that he had it to the point that they were willing to finance him? The Moors were defeated by Spain, and the Moors were extremely wealthy. And generally, when a group has been defeated, they have to hand over their riches to the victor. To the victor goes the spoils. And the Moors and Africans as a whole, there is recorded scholarship and schools of thought that African people had sailed the entire world before the recorded history of Europeans. And there is evidence that there were pyramids along the Mississippi River, and that Africans, known as the Aborigine, had settled the Mississippi River the same way they had settled the Nile. It is my thought that the Ninos brothers, who actually owned the Nina Pinta Santa Maria, and were navigators of Christopher Columbus, were not just helpers. They were Moors who were hired to take him to where the Moors got their money from, because history shows when they didn't want to fund him, those three countries, that he didn't know what he was doing. So how did he get directly to this place between January of 1492 and October of 1492? Again, if you don't have the words, you cannot see something. So now I want to actually put the words into place so we can begin to see that this probably was not an exploration, that indeed this was a direction to where the riches that came from the Moors originated.